Upsetting the other team has to be one of the most rewarding things in the game of spades. It's also one of the most strategically important things to be able to do, as despite for it just being fun, the point differential it creates makes it arguably the single most important factor in deciding games. And while you often hear from beginners that they only really go for the set on a table bit of 12 or higher, more experienced players will regularly go for the set on a standard 11-bit, but in order to pull those off consistently and get to the next level of your play, you really need to be familiar with a lot of those little tricks that enable you to maximize your points in the game. So today I want to teach you everything I know about those techniques, so you can get more of those epic sets. But before we go into all the techniques you need, let's zoom out to the bigger picture. If you're playing ace high, there's 52 cards in the deck, and every round 13 of them will guaranteed win a trick. Which ones those are can vary quite a bit. Going by some of my recent games, it could be maybe these or those, sometimes these, but some of them are quite consistent. And in the ace high variant, those are usually the aces and kings in every suit, often the queen of spades, as well as maybe one or two additional spade points for those people who have a long spade suit. So if we divide those cards into two for the sake of our example, these are the cards that we have to capture at least one of, while also making the unbid rounds if we want to set our opponent. With the aces being usually quite safe points that are hard to attack even with the best strategy, let's start by looking at the opponent's kings, where there are multiple ways they can be attacked. And many of those require in one way or the other one or both of these two, the ace and the queen. Best case scenario is if you have both the ace and the queen and you get to act last in a round. Because whatever your opponent plays, you're in the best position to get 2 points from it. If they play the king, you can beat it with the ace. If they don't play the king, you can play the queen and play your ace in the next opportunity. So that's why if you have the lead with ace and queen, you always want to lead another suit, ideally, because you want to get yourself into the best position for this maneuver. But even with lesser holdings, being last to act can have advantages. If they don't have a good lead, just having the ace in this position can lead you to snatch up the opponent's king. And who knows, maybe your partner wakes up with a queen and gets our next point. But you don't always get to act last. Luckily, even from other positions, there's ways to attack the opponent's kings. As mentioned before, if you are third to act in a given round, you still have the possibility to steal the king point, only this time it's a bit more speculative, because if you play your queen rather than your ace in third position and the opponent on the right has the king, you will get your queen point early. If the opponent on the left has the king, it won't work, but it's a move very much worth the risk if you have less than 5 cards of the suit and it's likely enough that you make the ace point in the second round anyway. Also, when the finesse works the first time around and you happen to have the jack as well, you have a very good guess now where the king is located, and next time when someone else leads the suit, you can play your jack and keep the ace for when the opponent on the right finally plays his king. That would be a double finesse in that case. Moving on to the next position, you can also put pressure on the king from here, because if you have the ace in the second position, the recommendation, similar to the finesse, is to just play a low card in the first round, because since people are rightfully hesitant to play the king in the first round when the ace is still out there, if the opponents don't have a very good lead, it will often get you into situations like this one, where if you imagine the right-hand opponent had played a low card, his teammate in third position would now be able to make his point with as low as a 10. And if you win the first round low and get the ace in the second round, in the third round you will often be able to cut in, and that way the opponent will never get to make their king point. Similar to the finesse in third position, second hand low is something that becomes more risky to play if you have 5 or more cards in the suit. But with 4 or less cards, it's just one of those things that is worth it, because it will often get you into an advantageous position. And the last thing in this category, if you see your teammate lead the queen and you're playing to maximize your points, consider not playing your ace in third position, but rather playing low. That way you may be able to pull off a sneaky team finesse if opponent on the right has the king. And the bonus is also, if you see your teammate lead the queen, it often means he has only a doubleton, so he might be able to cut in spades in the third round. So if right-hand opponent has the king, you have a good chance to stop him from making a point with it. In general, if you're in his position, it is recommended to play the king on the queen though, in second position. Even though otherwise it is recommended to play second hand low. The only two exceptions are if the first person plays the king or the queen. Once you know when and how to use the techniques I talked about so far, it already gives you a major leg up on beginners who are usually too afraid of something like early spade cuts before even considering playing something like a finesse. But that also gets us to the next topic, setting people by using the spade suit. If you ask an enthusiastic beginner how to set the opponent, they will probably say something like this. They will play their aces and kings as early as possible, and then they put emphasis on always leading their shortest suit, cutting in spades, and ideally looking for that void in the partner suit so that you can get into a situation like this. This is called a cross ruff, where you and your partner can both cut in at different suits and the opponents have to play the regular cards. So you can just both get a bunch of points in a row without any harm to the side. And indeed, that is a very good situation that often results in a set for you, in that the opponent's spades will all be bunched together by the end and they won't manage to make up for some of those ace and king points that you have cut with your spades in the early rounds. Now, if your spade suit looks a bit like this, it's easy to see that those low spades wouldn't have made points in any other way. So the more spade cuts you get, the more you can maximize your points and put the opponent under pressure. The evaluation already changes a bit if you have something like this, right? If you have a protected queen or king point in a short suit, what might happen, for example, if you play against good opponents, is that you get your first spade cut, which alerts the opponents, and as soon as they gain the lead, they will do something like this, attacking your queen point that is now not protected anymore by additional spades behind it, and you will have not really gained any points by cutting in, because the queen you counted on is now captured. And what happened to your queen may then be called spade demotion. Your highest spade losing in value because of a previous spade cut. The other thing we can already mention is the over ruff. This requires a bit of a sense of the distribution, but if you purely rely on cutting in your spades, sooner or later something like this will happen. You will cut in and the opponent will be able to over ruff with the higher spade, and you should really be careful to avoid those over ruff situations. It can be pretty much as bad as losing a king in a regular suit, because the opponent gets a spade while often paying very little cost in return. So protecting yourself against over ruffs and getting your teammate in the position for potential over ruffs, those are things that you should try to build an intuition for. This is again where position is important. If your teammate and the opponent on his left have given off signs that they may be getting void in the suit, for example by discarding unreasonably high cards, this may be an opportunity where you can feed him a sneaky over ruff. The opposite is the case if the opponent on his right might be running out of the suit, or there's no other cards left in the suit in general. That will probably be the time to shift gears and lead another suit, or even just go ahead and lead the spade suit, because at least that way both opponents will lose a spade point and one of them will be losing one of their highest, rather than just one higher than the original cutting card. Regardless of those points though, it is generally the right approach if your team are low in spades from the start to look for those cuts and then play the regular suit again, looking for cuts for the teammate or for them giving you more cuts. Now let's look at this though. Let's assume you and your teammate have long spades, which you can already see in the bidding, in combination with which players have won the points in the regular suits. The average spade holding is 3.25, which means that as an individual you have long spades with 4 or more spades, and as a team you have long spades with 7 or more. What many people don't realize is that cutting in from a long suit doesn't actually promise to gain you more points compared to leading them. Let's just compare this situation where you decide to cut in and see where it ends up to this situation where you decide to, after your first cut, lead the spades actively. Maybe on the first look, the results look a bit similar, but you will already notice the opponent team now has no or only one spade, while you still have both two spades to cut in and make your cutting points. But if we keep this example going, and you keep depending on the regular suit cuts on the left without getting rid of opponent's spades first, the scores will start to vary quite drastically. I've set up the cards to show the difference particularly clearly, but this is literally what I see so often at the lower level, where a team has all the control of a long spade suit, but doesn't make any use of it and doesn't protect themselves against enemy cuts. So if you don't want to miss out on two crucial points like that, let's first answer, how do you draw spades? That is a very foundational topic if you want to enjoy the game and become a good player. So let's say you recognize your team has the spade advantage, or you want to eliminate the chance of them cross-ruffing. Unless you have a high sequence of spades, then you would start with the top of the sequence. You usually start playing a low spade and see if your partner in third position wakes up with the ace. This is already an important point. The person in third position should usually play high. So the rule goes, it's second hand low, third hand high. When I play my lowest, I don't want to see my partner hiding away his king, for example. He should just trust the process. We don't want to give the opponent an extra trick, as he would get otherwise here, for example, with his 9. And if my teammate wins the trick here, he should now know the intentions of me. And if he trusts that I have a sense of the situation, he will now have to lead a spade in return in order to continue the drawing out of the spades. If you have the highest spade possible, now is maybe the time where you could lead that. Otherwise you lead low again and see what your partner has. And with this spade lead, the table already looks a bit different, right? They already pose way less of a threat than they did before. And your team still has a bunch of roughing power with the spades to cut in and change to the suit that you like the most. A lot of recommendations are that you leave it at that. If you have long spades, 2 full rounds of spades will usually be enough to at least make one of the opponents void of spades. And it's not as effective anymore if you just draw one spade from the opponent and one from your teammate. Here, for example, that third spade lead makes us win 1 less point compared to how we previously played it. And that will often happen if you lead your spades that one time too many. See, I'm not able to cut his hard point anymore because I let away my last spade. There are some situations where you maybe want to lead spades 3 or even 4 times. That is usually the case if you have a really good follow-up plan with another suit that you know you can get points without defense, and then you may also draw more spades than 2 rounds. I made this little table to wrap up this section. Basically, if you both have long spades, you should try to draw them as soon as possible. Things are a bit more nuanced if one of you have short and one of you have long spades. With a sizable spade suit, you should still look to draw spades here. Ideally, of course, your teammate gets a cut in before you draw out their spades. Also pay attention if you are short and your partner is long, you might want to help him to draw out spades. And if both of you have short spades, you should look to cut in and play the regular suit. There's still situations here where you want to lead spades, for example to stop their cross ruff. Look, it's all a bit more nuanced than I can display here, but I think with this as a general guide, you'll figure it out over time. So okay, I have mentioned before that after drawing spades, you now have a lot of flexibility to continue with the suit that you like. But what should you be looking out for? That kind of brings us over to the next point, which is the long suit. Long suits can be a big deal because they can be exactly the solution. Because one of their traits is you are usually the last person with cards of that suit. Now, most of the time, nothing much will come out of that. Because at the end game, there will either still be spades left in the opponent's teams, or you will not have an entry card that allows you to gain control and lead those suits again. But let's say, for example, your partner has some control in the hand, and he has noticed that the other 2 are void of the diamonds. This is not always easy to coordinate, but if he now has the sense that you still have some diamond winners left, he may play a so-called exit card, a low card used to give the control over to your teammate. And ideally, you want this situation, right? You have a bunch of diamonds and the opponent can't defend against it, so you can just win point after point with it. So this is something to look out for, but a bit tricky to coordinate. And you won't always be able to pull it off like that. Now this changes if you are the person who has both the long suit in the regular suit and the long suit in spades. If you have 5 or more cards of both, you should generally become very alert because it can give you an almost sure opportunity for a special type of set. Especially if you have some high cards in the regular suit. You want to get the long regular suit going as soon as possible. Ideally, someone else breaks the spades, but if you have to break the spades, it's important to flush spades as early as possible and lower the general spade count among the table. And now, once it's all set up, once you gain the lead again, you can play the suit that you have set up and there will be no defense because everyone else is out of that suit. Sometimes it takes an extra spade cut or an extra win here or there, but once you have the lead again, you can always go back and lead a suit that no one else is able to beat now. Really impressive move, and one that starts to lead us over to the more advanced strategies. So everything we talked about so far doesn't require that much additional ability of card counting, etc. You can just more or less apply it from the get-go and it will already improve your game by a lot. And now we start to get to maneuvers that are also very good to know about, but are generally more tricky to consistently pull off. Before I mention them, I also have to give credit to the book Master Spades by Fleishman, which is where I got most of my information about those things from, so I can recommend it if you want to read more about any of the things I have talked in this video. Let's start here. I have talked about the fact that cutting in with your spades is not always the most effective way to deal with a situation. This actually goes so far as there being strategies where you intentionally feed the opponent situations where they should cut in with their spades and your own spades become stronger in return by a mechanism called trump promotion. In this situation, for example, if I play my spade, the opponents will be able to win all the 2 remaining spade points and then will be able to play their diamond winner. However, if I play the heart and feed the opponent here a cutting point, we will be able to win at least one of the remaining spade points. Since we're starting to look at situations now where there's less cards left to be played in the hand, we are entering a special category called the endgame. The endgame is originally used for chess, where there's few pieces left. Similar in spades, the dynamic changes a bit. Some people have the last card of their suit and the gaps between cards are also a bit different. Another strategy here I think is very useful is the end play. We have discussed before how the best position is to act last in a game, because then you can win with the lowest card that is required. And the end plays are strategies where you intentionally give the lead away from you in order to then be in a position where you can finesse the opponent. Here, for example, you know someone else still has a higher spade, but you have a nice finessing hand. So if you know that only hearts are left and you give the lead away from you, you get to make 2 points with this king-jack combination rather than only 1, which you would if you led your heart suit. Like I said, it often requires a bit of a better sense of what cards are left than the typical beginner has, but it's still something that I think will enrich your intuition. And now that we're starting to lead spades again, another strategy for the endgame is the so-called squeeze play. The idea here is that if there's an opponent with strong cards left who is trying to protect 2 suits, if you play your last spade or your last clear winner, he may now be forced to make a discard that gives up an opening for you and your partner. And you have to pay attention in the sense that in this case, if he discards the heart, you should play your heart suit, and if he discards the club, then you can play your jack of clubs. Your partner on his left also needs a threat card, and then you may prevent your opponent from making any points with an otherwise strong endgame holding. So yeah, it's a rare occurrence to be able to pull it off like that. I will link an article that goes into a bit more detail in the description, but I think what everyone can learn from that is that if you have the last spade, when you lead it, they will have to remember what suits are left, and you might bring the opponents into situations where they're prone to make a mistake. A lighter form of the squeeze play that is more easily pulled off is the so-called strip squeeze, which is kind of a mixture out of end plays and regular squeezes. There, if you play your last spade, you can force them to make a discard that sets you up for an end play. So once again, leading the spade can make it tricky for your opponent, especially if you have a finessing hand left that you want to act last with. Here Steve Fleishman also points out that this is often especially easy to recognize when one of the opponents is making a nil bid and you want to set the coverer of the nil and only have to track one opponent's cards. Then you can pull off something such as this and maximize your points at the end of the game. And with this, I think I will leave it at that for now. If you enjoyed the video and want to see similar like it, consider to comment, like, share or subscribe under the video. And bonus thought that I read under another how to set video, it's that if you have ace queen and you don't have another good lead, you can consider playing the queen, hoping that left-hand opponent won't play the king on top of it, and that way maybe maximizing the 2 points as well. I don't know, like I would usually always put the king on the queen on second position, but I think it has its area of application in certain situations against certain opponents.